Russia and Ukraine. We'll get to Venezuela later. But the situation with Russia and Ukraine, it seems that there's no end in sight here. And then
there's an end. There's an end. Russia's winning. I don't know why people don't understand this. Not only is Russia winning, Russia's going to win. And there's nothing anybody can do to stop them. And Putin finally, the Russians finally called Trump out on it. Because normally it's Trump saying, Vladimir Putin's not doing what I want him to do. We can't have a meeting with the Russians until the Russians are willing to accept the terms. And the Russians finally came back and said, no, Donnie, we can't have a meeting with you until you're ready to accept our reality. Because our reality is the only one that counts. Vladimir Putin gave a press conference. Kupiansk, 5,000 Ukrainians surrounded. Pokrovsk, 5,500 Ukrainians surrounded. The report, there's 5 more cauldrons building up, where anywhere from 1,000 to another, several thousand. There's equivalent of the potential of 50,000 Ukrainian soldiers being surrounded by the Russians in the coming months. This battlefield is evolving in ways that the Russians have been building up for. This is what collapse looks like. The Ukrainians are in an absolute panic. Everybody's in a panic. And the Russians are just tired of playing games. They said, we can bring a war to an end, but you have to accept battlefield reality. We prefer you accept it up front, but if you want us to prove it on the battlefield, we will. And that's what they're doing right now. And they're slaughtering the Ukrainians. It's just an absolute bloodbath. And the Russians aren't about to back down. It's tough for the American audience because what's happening right now, Sabby, is there is a British-run information warfare operation taking place called Keep Ukraine in the Fight. I don't know if you've been looking at your X feed, or I don't know what social medias you're on, but have you seen that the domination of stories out there about how Ukraine is striking Russian oil targets and the sanctions, and Putin's in a panic, and you see the Telegraph, Putin's in a panic for this, this, that, and the other thing? It's all fiction. Putin's not in a panic. There's never been a president more relaxed than Vladimir Putin right now. Are there problems for Russia? Sure. It's a war. But Russia's handling it. All this stuff. India and China have stopped buying Russian oil. The Russian economy is going to hell. Actually, the Indians are buying Russian oil, and the Chinese are buying Russian oil, and everybody's buying Russian oil. Is there going to be a little bit of a pinch? Yeah, but if you know something about the energy security economy, what happens when there's a pinch, Savvy? 2 + 2 = 4. The price of oil goes up. And so you create a situation where Russia can't sell as much oil. They drop a couple 100,000 barrels, but the price of oil goes up. So it's a wash. It doesn't impact the Russians at all. This is the reality. Europe's economy is collapsing as we speak. The German economy is an absolute free fall. France is a basket case. England, a joke. The Ukrainians can't survive without $120 billion of infusion of European and American taxpayer money. They have no functioning economy at all. And yet we're supposed to believe all the crap all the stuff out there about the imminent collapse of Russia. No, I just was in Russia. I just came back about a week ago. I'm here to tell you right now, it's a nation at war. People are dying. I need to be careful here, not to come off as too glib. Russians are dying. It's a hard-fought war. The economy isn't functioning. But again, I just want to point out to people, what's the growth rate of the American economy last year? 1.6%. 1.6%. You know what the growth rate of the Russian economy is under sanctions? 4%. Ooh.
Wow.
Guys, you understand that the Russian economy is growing at a rate twice as fast as the American economy? Now, the American economy is big and bigger, but the Russian economy is doing okay. Could it be better? Yeah, lift sanctions and watch it thrive. But the Russian economy has been fine-tuned over 4 years of sanctions. They know which way is up. People belittle the Russians. What was it John McCain liked to say? It's just a gas station with nuclear weapons. Well, gee, guys, who do you think understands the business of big gas stations better than a gas station? So when we're going to talk about global energy security in the energy markets, Do you think maybe the Russians know the global energy market better than just about it? Ask the Saudis. Every time the Saudis tried to put a squeeze on the Russians, tried to take away market share, etc., Russia turned around and slapped them down. And it was always the Saudis that backed off. Want to know why? Because Russian oil is about the cheapest oil in the world to pull out of the ground. So when you have prices at $60 a barrel and it costs the Russians $8 to pull it out of the ground, their profit margin's a little bit bigger. In the United States, where it costs us, $40 to pull out of the ground, even more, we're only making $20 a barrel. So our profit margins on it. The same thing with the Saudis. The Russians will always win, though they can discount their oil more than anybody else. And at the end of the day, the world needs energy, and buying oil is expensive business. People will buy discounted oil, and Russia could discount their oil better than anybody out there. The Russians have Scott Bessent is an idiot, a straight up moronic idiot. And I know I've just insulted everybody who, never mind, it was a bad joke, but calling Scott an idiot is an insult to idiots. The man truly doesn't know what he's doing, but this is typical of Trump. He's surrounded himself with these sycophantic, billionaires whose sole focus is money, 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 and they don't care about reality. There are things happening. Look at Argentina. We poured $40 billion into propping up Milei down there, who has a failing economy. Why did we do that? Because we like him? Well, yeah, Trump. But no, we did it because Scott Bessent's business partner had over invested into the peso, and the peso was crashing. And this hedge fund manager was going to lose everything. And he picked up the phone and he called Scott Bessent. He said, bail me out, boss. So we just went in with $20 billion of U.S. taxpayer money, and we bailed out the Argentinian peso in the short term so Bessent's pal could pull out of it. It's happening in broad daylight in front of everybody. We put Martha Stewart in prison for insider trading, the very thing that Congress does every day to stay viable. You saw the senator. We can't get away with insider trading because if you do that, nobody will want to be in Congress. Wow. So you admitted it, that the only reason why people join Congress is A, to help Israel, and B, to become millionaires. This is why, we see all these people that make $56,000 running his, I'm part of the American people. I'm one of you. In 2 years, I've got $5 million in the bank. I don't know how that happened, but somehow I was able to turn my measly $117,000 salary into $5 million. I don't know. It just happened. I got lucky, I guess. They're all corrupt. It's just right there. This administration is singularly the most corrupt administration that's ever been, because they're doing it right in our face. Scott Bessent bailed out his billionaire hedge fund manager by putting $40 billion of U.S. taxpayer money into Argentina. How did Argentina repay us? By immediately selling China soybeans at a time when the American soybean farmer is being screwed because of Trump's policy to China. Guys, this is it's right there in our face, and we're just letting it happen.
And it's a lot of corruption, right? Because I always tell people to follow the money. Like if people ask, like, okay, why is the U.S. so invested in this war with Russia and Ukraine? Because it's basically a proxy war for the United States. People ask, why are we so invested there, right? You mentioned Russia's economy that is growing like 4% with sanctions on them. Like it's insane. It's I would say the same reason why the U.S. wants to stop China. Right. So there's a lot of growth that's happening in other countries across the world. And the U.S. government wants the U.S. to remain this superpower. But things are changing, and other countries are growing in areas where we're not growing here. Our infrastructure is a mess. Like you could tell people probably about the subways in Russia and in Moscow or something. But our infrastructure here is a mess.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of unfair because you're picking on Russia's great strength. The Moscow metro system is a marvel, really a marvel, especially the old, the stuff built during the time of Stalin. And it's just it's not just an architectural feat or an engineering feat. They're work of art. I mean, they literally are literal works of art. I actually spent a day on this last trip just going around the metro to the different old stations and looking at them. I mean, the mosaics, the bronze statues. There's a whole series of and I forget the particular station, but I own dogs. There's my dog right behind me, right there. And so I went to the one where you pet the border dog, and it's all shiny. And then you go down. There's different parts on the statue that people pet. They just walk by. You just watch them. They're not walking by like tourists. These are casual people going to work, and as they walk by, they just reach out and they pet it for good luck. It's just an amazing thing. Then you come to the United States and go to New York City, and it's disgusting. Disgusting. New York City is disgusting. The subway system is disgusting. You land in Russian airports, clean, efficient. You land in JFK, chaos. Getting in and out of JFK is again disgusting. It's less than third world. The infrastructure we have. You go to China. I haven't been to China, but George Galloway, you know who he is, George. He and his wife just went to China to visit, and he's sending photographs and just like, oh my God, and we're talking about China, servicing cities of 20 million people, and with infrastructure that's just world class, fast trains that are fast, not like the Acela, the Amtrak train, the Acela. You pay your extra money, you go from New York City to Washington D.C. on the Acela. But when you get down to South Philly, you got to slow down to about 5 miles an hour because the train will be flipped off the track if it goes any faster than that. And God forbid you get caught walking down the train as you're trying to go to the cafe car because you're going to be banged back and forth, bouncing into people because the tracks. Yeah, that's the Acela. That's America's fast train.
I was going to say I've been on the Acela before, so I know what you're talking about when you get to South Philly.
Get to South Philly, you're just booming around, baby, because the tracks suck. And, where's our pride as a nation? Where's our pride as a nation? I mean, this is humiliating at a time when, and we're falling for it. I mean, tariffs. I don't know how many times I have to hear the MAGA crowd. We're bringing in more money for tariffs than ever before. We're going to send everybody out a $2,000 check. Oh, gee, thanks. Well, for making so much money off of tariffs, why did our debt go from 36 to 38 trillion? If we're bringing in 400 billion in tariffs, and yet our debt went up by 2 trillion, that's like me bringing out the credit card at Christmas time and going out and buying lottery tickets and saying, look, everybody, I bought you a lottery because I'm doing so well, but I paid for it out of a credit card that I can't afford to pay the minimum set on. So I'm just deeper and deeper in debt. America's economy is broke, straight up broke. And yet this buffoon is running around trying to convince everybody that everything's working. And now we're going to get involved in a $1 trillion war in Venezuela that we're going to lose. Oh, we'll get rid of Maduro. There's no doubt about that. We will get rid of Maduro, but we will not win this war. And all that oil that's under. One thing, again, you learned about the oil industry I've been working in the energy security field for about 20 years. Stability is the big thing. Oil companies love stability because you're investing a whole bunch of money into a long-term project. So you want to put down $5, $6, $10 billion to pull oil out of the ground for 20 to 30 years so that you can make, windfall profits, but you need stability. If there's fighting on the ground, if pipelines are going boom, if oil derricks are going boom, if oil executives are being kidnapped and murdered, you're not doing well. The oil business doesn't do it. Venezuela, if we do what Trump is claiming he's going to do, the Venezuelan oil economy is going to disappear. We're not going to get it. And then that's going to create havoc on the global energy security market. And then South America is going to go up. And this war against the cartels is a suicidal venture. We're blowing up fishing boats. Maybe some of those fishing boats have drugs in them. Maybe. We don't know. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But that's not defeating the cartels because people are still snorting cocaine here in America. And that's coming from South America. People are still shooting their veins with heroin. That's coming from someplace. The reality about the war on drugs is that until you cut the demand, there will always be supply. There will always be supply. So the idea that we're making a dent in any of this is absurd in the extreme. This is just Marco Rubio's fantasy. He's been wanting to do this war against Maduro since 2016. And, Miriam Adelson made, the Israeli lady, she's not American. Let's just be honest about this. She's Israeli. And she paid Donald Trump $100 million to put Marco Rubio in his cabinet. He was supposed to be the vice president, but even that was too much of a stench for Donald Trump. Couldn't handle that because he knows the truth. Marco Rubio hates Donald Trump, hates him with a passion. You guys remember the 2016 election cycle, don't you?
Little Marco.
Little Marco. Marco said Donald Trump's the dumbest man, the most vile human being in the world. That hasn't changed. They despise each other. But Marco Rubio has been given free rein in Latin America.
Yep.
And so this little Cuban dictator that we have, the wannabe president, is now going to go to war in Venezuela and against Colombia as well, because you're not going to go to war in Venezuela without going to war in Colombia. And it's going to destabilize everything, including Brazil. Did you see the reports coming out of Rio de Janeiro today about the de facto state of war that exists in the streets in the Brazilian, in this large Brazilian city? We are going to turn Latin America. And then guess what happened when you have tens of millions of people displaced because of war? Where do they head? Do they head south or do they head north? They head north to Gringo land, and we're going to be flooded with refugees again. Donald Trump is literally one of the least qualified people in the world to be president of the United States. I mean, and it's plain out. And where is Congress? Where is the Supreme Court? Where are the American people? I mean, are we really this stupid? That's a rhetorical question, because the answer is, with few exceptions, yes, we are.
Well, speaking of Congress and speaking of Venezuela, I want you to see what Lindsey Graham said, because he just says the quiet part out in the open. You guys have got to hear this about Venezuela.
We didn't have a declaration to go into Panama. Bush 41 went into Panama to replace the leadership there because the Panamanian leadership were working with drug cartels to threaten our country. Reagan didn't have a declaration of war, congressional authorization to deal with Cuban influence. So this idea of Rand Paul, I just fundamentally disagree with. To the other senators, you deserve more information and you're going to get more information. But there is no requirement for Congress to declare war before the commander-in-chief can use force. Panama and Grenada are two examples in our backyard where Republican presidents chose to go after countries and leaders that were threatening our people.
So he makes it very clear here, Scott, that that's what they want to do. They want to overthrow a Maduro, and she comes back and asks about war crimes. I thought this was pretty good.
But there seem to be a number of issues wound up in here. I know you personally used to serve as a judge advocate in the Air Force. We looked at the JAG manual. Preventative self-defense employed to counter non-imminent threats is illegal under international law. So if we are not at war and these suspected criminals pose no threat of imminent violence, isn't this potentially a war crime to be killing the people on these boats and then to be taking out a leader?
No, not at all. I don't know what manual you're referring to, but I know what President Bush 41 did. He took down Ortega, the leader of Panama, because he was involved in drug trafficking, threatening our country. Venezuela is now partnering with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is running out of money because Iran is weak.
That's not new.
Partnering with drug cartels in Venezuela. No, it should have stopped. Here's what's new. You got a commander-in-chief that's not going to put up with this crap. We're not going to sit on the sidelines and watch boats full of drugs come to our country. We're going to blow them up and kill the people that want to poison America. And we're now going to expand operations, I think, to the land. So please be clear about what I'm saying today. President Donald Trump sees Venezuela and Colombia as direct threats to our country because they house narco-terrorist organizations. The leader of Venezuela is an indicted drug dealer in American courts. So, yeah, the game is changing when it comes to drug traffickers and drug cartels. We're going to use military force like we have in the past to protect our country. That's the new game we're playing, and I'm glad we're playing that game. And if I were Maduro, I'd find a way to leave before he goes down.
So it's just, Scott, of course, they're using the excuse of the drug trafficking, as you mentioned earlier, but they, of course, don't admit that Venezuela has billions of barrels of oil. And then also, like, this does constitute a war crime. They have been hitting boats that are in the Caribbean that aren't even associated with Venezuela.
Yep. And they've been hitting boats in the Pacific, too. Understand that we're fighting it on both fronts. We're blowing up boats in the Pacific. We're blowing up boats off the coast of Venezuela. This is a flagrant war crime. Hey, Lindsay, I hope you're watching. I know you're not, but maybe you'll watch a clip. Somebody send a clip to Lindsay. Hermann Goring, the Nazi war criminal, corpulent, fat, disgusting pig of a man, whom you remind me of a lot, used to chuckle like this, I would imagine, in his little lavish dinner parties in 1943 and 44 about what Germany was doing, this, that, and the other thing. He ended up biting into a cyanide capsule, committing suicide before he was tried before the Nuremberg tribunals to be hung by the neck until dead. That is your fate if the world was just. You are a jackal of a human being. And you sat there and you chuckled as the American military, whom you once served as a judge advocate, commits war crimes, de facto war crimes. There's no defense about what we're doing. At least one of the admiral in command of Southern Command had the honor to resign and walk away, saying he doesn't want to do this. Maybe more people need to do that as well, because you're asking Americans to commit war crimes. In the Nuremberg defenses, I was just following orders. That doesn't hack it. The manual is quite clear. The Americans pulling the triggers on these attacks are committing war crimes, and they need to be held accountable to. We are supposed to be better than the rest. We're supposed to be the exceptional nation. And what makes us exceptional isn't the power that we have from the military, but the fact that we are a nation supposedly governed by the rule of law. And the rule of law is quite clear when it comes to military force. So Lindsey Graham is a war criminal. He just admitted to it. And so is President Trump, and so is everybody who is in the chain of command that goes down to this. But we're getting ready to commit even greater war crimes. The illegal invasion and occupation of a sovereign state is a war crime. Lindsey Graham is also wrong. The War Powers Act, yes, Congress has abrogated its responsibilities for the declaration of war. The president has certain abilities under the War Powers Act to use military force in the case of imminent danger, in which the immediacy of the danger prohibits him from going to Congress. And so he will have up to 90 days extended to 180 days to go to Congress and explain why he used military force. Here, Lindsey Graham saying, we don't have to do that. We're going in. We're going in. There's going to be a land option. We got an air option. We got all these options. Congress really needs to step up to the plate. It's time for the War Powers Act to be either rescinded in totality or modified, so that when we say there has to be an imminent threat, it needs to be, the reason why the president has war powers is if America was attacked. The idea is that you don't have time to assemble Congress and brief Congress. Well, America's not being attacked. We're the ones getting ready to carry out a war of aggression. And now we come back full circle to the Nuremberg tribunals, because war of aggression was defined by the Nuremberg tribunals as the ultimate war crime, because from the war of aggression, all other war crimes emanate. And again, you mentioned oil. James Story, a distinguished American ambassador, was the number 2 at the American embassy in Caracas when we shut that down. And then he moved to Colombia, where he headed up the, basically the U.S. embassy in Venezuela in exile. And he was involved in all of the regime change stuff. I mean, that's the policy of the United States. He implemented that policy. I don't bring it up because I want to say that everything James Story did, I agree with. I want to bring it up by saying that James Story is aware of everything that happened, especially in the first Trump administration, all the covert actions against Venezuela, and that continued on through the Biden administration. And he has said linking Venezuela to narcotics is just the wrong thing. He said, this is about oil. This is about resources. That's all it's about. There is no cognizable case against Maduro or anybody else. He was indicted. You can indict a ham sandwich. All right. The fact that the U.S. government was able to go to the Southern District of New York and get an indictment against Maduro doesn't mean anything. First of all, with all due respect, again, to the fat jackal named Lindsey Graham, he's a lawyer. You know that an indictment is not a finding of guilt? It's just probable cause. It says that you made a case of probable cause, and you're supposed to bring the person to justice. But what he's saying is, oh, no. This is a finding of guilt, and now we are going to be judge, jury, and executioner and kill this guy. He needs to run because we're coming in and we're eliminating him. If you are an American and you're listening to words, do you understand how disgusting this is? Because I'm just telling you right now, guys, if they can do it to Maduro, they can do it to you. They can do it to me. They can do it to Sabby. They can do it to everybody on this program. They're going to find you guilty before they even have a trial. And if you don't think that the American justice system is the most corrupt justice system in the world, then you haven't been studying American justice. We can indict anybody. We do indict anybody. Hell, they raided my house with a affidavit of probable cause that is still classified. They won't release it. Why? Because it was based upon a lie, a series of lies told by the FBI to a judge who didn't ask any questions and just signed off on it so 40 agents could raid my house. They can do it to anybody, make anything up. And what they did to Maduro was manufacture a case about him being involved in narco trafficking that has no basis in reality or fact. His indictment does not mean he's guilty. All his indictment means is that the U.S. government has decided to label him with something. And that's what they have. And now Lindsey Graham's trying to make the argument. This guy was a judge. He should be disbarred for this. Hell, you couldn't pass law school 101 making the arguments he's making right now. But again, the fact that he's saying it and the fact that the American people are sitting there going, all right, yeah, so what? Guys, this is over for the constitutional republic. I hope people understand what's happening. The way this Trump administration is behaving, it is literally a stake through the heart. It's damn right it's against the U.S. Constitution. Thank you. Somebody finally gets it. But the problem is, with all due respect, most Americans haven't read the Constitution. They're unfamiliar with it. They don't understand. They have simplistic knowledge. To become an American citizen, if you're an immigrant to this country, you have to take a test on the Constitution. You have to pass that test. I will make a bet with you right now. 9 out of 10 Americans today, natural-born Americans, if given the citizenship test, would fail it, which means we're not qualified to be citizens of this country. Because to be a functioning citizen of this country, you have to embrace the Constitution, live the Constitution, know the Constitution. And Americans right now are just sleepwalking. We just get up in the morning. We live in this bubble of consumerism. We're addicted to digital entertainment, and that's what happens. And it's sad because we're watching the death of the constitutional republic known as the United States of America.
That's right. And I do want to show people, because people need to see what's been happening. Venezuela suspends energy agreements with Trinidad after U.S. warship arrived at the island. So we're talking about, again, Trinidad and Tobago, Caribbean islands, who had nothing to do with this, but the U.S. just brings in a warship. From what I understand, I think the president of Trinidad has basically kind of sold out the people from what I've been reading. But it says that Trinidad is now hosting one of the U.S. warships involved in a controversial campaign to destroy the Venezuelan speedboats allegedly carrying drugs to the United States. So for people, I don't know if everybody knows this, but there are U.S. warships in Trinidad to fight Venezuela. This is crazy.
There's U.S. warships. Look, This is speculation because I don't want to be doing anything untoward. As much as I would disagree with a war in Venezuela, I'm not going to put American service members' lives at risk with, let's just put it this way. The CIA has a very large paramilitary division that became even larger after 9/11, was running private armies in Afghanistan and Iraq, in Syria. And they're building a private army right now for Venezuela. The CIA right now is arming, training, equipping tens of thousands of people from around the region whose job is to carry out various, activities when called upon to do so. If you look at the population of Venezuela, you'll see that it's not, homogenic, meaning that they're not all the same. You have coastal tribes, you have interior tribes, you have people of different, ethnic backgrounds and tribal backgrounds. And we're recruiting people from neighboring countries that have links to this to try and lure these people away. And so all the nations surrounding Venezuela today have large CIA contingents in them, Trinidad and Tobago also. And together with the CIA, we have joint special operations, our tier 1 commando forces. We also have regular special forces that specialize in working with indigenous peoples. And they are deployed now, working aggressively to carry out the president's orders, which the president has acknowledged. He has signed a covert finding authorizing lethal force. That means that the CIA is preparing to assassinate Maduro, assassinate the Venezuelan leadership. We have American special forces that will facilitate this because we can sheep dip them. What's that, Scott? Well, gosh, you remember when SEAL Team 6 went into Pakistan to get Osama bin Laden? They didn't go in as SEAL Team 6. They went under the command and the authority of the CIA because there was a legal problem sending them in as the military. So when they crossed the border, they got sheep dipped, and they were working for the CIA for that. And that's what's happening right now with a whole bunch of our special operations forces. They're being sheep dipped and handed over to the CIA to carry out this covert war. It's happening as we speak right now. Airfields are being prepped, fuels being put in there, munitions are being identified, munition handling. And so when the time comes, you're going to see a surge of American air power into these places like Trinidad and Tobago, and we're going to be using those as jumping off place to carry out military operations against Venezuela.
Wow. It's so like alarming because I'm just like, you think a lot of people know what is happening, or that they just buy the narrative that Venezuela, it's all about drugs and that's why we're coming after Venezuela.
When you say no, that implies knowledge. And knowledge, true knowledge is gained with people studying, a concerted effort to accumulate fact-based information. You don't know something simply because you turned on TV and watched the evening news. You don't know something because you follow a specific politically motivated feed on your Telegram channel or on X channel. That's not knowledge. That's actually, in many cases, ignorance that is disguised as knowledge. To know something, you actually have to show intellectual curiosity. And I would say that when the average American wakes up in the morning, when it comes to Venezuela, there is no intellectual curiosity. What there is laziness, the laziness of a citizen who stopped caring about the real state of affairs in their country because they become so consumed with consumerism, with the daily challenges of, can I get this next Xbox, or can I get this thing, or get that thing, get this thing. And they stop saying, what's actually the best thing that's going to happen for my country today? What's the state of affairs going to be when my children grow up? What world is my children going to inherit? And if I have a son, one of the greatest transformations I ever saw in my life was a friend of mine who was a hardcore Republican and truly believed that we should be going after Saddam because he knew that Saddam Hussein was a bad guy. How did he know it? Well, he saw it on TV. And I told him, I said, because at that time his kids were, young teenagers. And I said, there's going to come a day, because this war isn't going to end the way you think it's going to end. There's going to come a day when your kids are going to be 18 years old and susceptible to going up. Would you want your kids to go to this war? And, the answer was, well, I don't have to worry about that right now. But, when they turned 18, this guy became anti-war in a heartbeat, because suddenly he realized that this conflict that he was urging to take place wasn't worth the sacrifice of his sons. And so I respect that, except when the war started, though, you were willing to let other people's sons go off and die in this war. It was worth their blood, but not the blood. And this is what parents have to ask themselves. If you had a son that's 18 years old, do you view Venezuela as a conflict worthy of the sacrifice of your son's life? Are the Venezuelans doing something to America right now that warrants the sacrifice of your son's life or your daughter's life? And if the answer is no, then what the hell are you doing? If you're not willing to sacrifice your son, if you're not willing to sacrifice your daughter, then why are you willing to sit back and let other Americans sacrifice their sons and their daughters? If it's not worth your blood, it's not worth anybody's blood. And that's how we have to view Venezuela. It's not worth the blood of a single American at all. We shouldn't be there. They don't pose a threat against us. And this should be a war that we all oppose. But unless you have skin in the game, it's very difficult for people to become engaged. We just become addicted to the news that the mainstream, that the establishment is spoon feeding us.
Well said there, Scott. That's a good thing. Like, people, you have to put yourself in their shoes. You shouldn't even have to do that. But it's like, when you put it in those terms, then people start to see and feel a little bit differently, because it involves them or someone close to them. But that's a good way of putting it. Scott, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Anything you have coming up that you want to promote?
Look, I'm almost singularly focused on trying to stop a nuclear war between Russia and the United States. So I'm heading back to Russia in November to continue the project called the Russia House. People can support this. There's hopefully some very interesting things can come about from this trip that talk about arms control, talk about bettering U.S.-Russian relations. So if you go to my Substack page, Real Scott Ritter, or just go to scottritter.com, you can read about this. And if you can support, Dan, I will make this point. To work in Russia today, you have to be very careful because of the legal environment. The sanctions are real. And that means that, anybody like myself who's going to go over there and do the work, I have to pay for everything. And if you've taken a look at my paycheck, contrary to popular belief, I don't receive money from Vladimir Putin or anybody else for that matter. I write for a living, and I get money from my Substack page, and that pays the bills. It doesn't create this operational fund. So to go to Russia to conduct what I call citizens diplomacy requires the support of the American citizen. And if it's something you believe in and you would like to help, go to scottritter.com. There's a donation page, and I can promise you anything you donate will be put to very, very effective use trying to stop a nuclear war between the United States and Russia.
All right. Check that out, you guys. Scott, thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Sammy.